Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 12 of Global Contenders, the review series for Gran Turismo's numerous categories within the touring car class, be it DTM, BTCC, etc. And this particular vehicle kind of falls into this category, but at the same time kind of doesn't. Because technically it's not strictly speaking a touring car. It's of course an Australian racing car classified as a V8 supercar, but touring cars are basically the closest thing that this can be classified under on the game. It's the only V8 supercar ever, I believe, to be featured on Gran Turismo, and it's been featured on quite a number of Gran Turismo games. And it's always been a very niched vehicle. Being the only car of its type in the game, it doesn't really have many direct, natural rivals. So whenever you use the car, to some degree it always feels kind of like you're improvising. You're putting it up against stuff which it wouldn't really usually be up against. Now, back in the day when there were less GT cars and especially less prototypes to choose from on Gran Turismo, there was basically just the big three, the 787B, the Toyota GT1 and the Nissan R390 before all the rest became added. This car used to be put into a lot of career mode races. You used to see the Tickford, as it was known back then, in a lot of career mode racing, especially the higher end stuff. That was another category that would often see the Panos. The Esperante GTR1 featured a car which, like this, has been kind of used less and less as the game has progressed. The Lister Storm also falls into that category. Less and less people use it as more other options become available. Does that mean then that this car, the Falcon XR8, is a bad car? Or is it more just a case that people don't really know when to use it effectively? Well, personally, I've discussed this car on the channel before, in the Dark series, but we didn't go as in-depth with it as far as spec. So, I love this car. I think it's a great race car on the game. In real life, I have no interest in V8 supercars at all. The only reason why I like this car is because on Gran Turismo it offers something different, and I like that. It weighs a little bit more than your average touring car, but it's also very powerful. Not necessarily the most powerful, but very powerful. Now, the engine in this car is a 5 litre. It produces 807 horsepower fully tuned, 577 foot-pounds of torque. Perhaps not as much torque as you might expect. It is pretty heavy, as we said, 1,350 kilos, which actually means that although for a touring car that's pretty heavy, that's actually GT3 territory. So it's not ridiculous. As far as horsepower per tonne, it's still putting out just under 600, so that's not bad at all, and the fully tuned PP is actually quite reasonable, 636. A car of its power could easily be higher than that, and considering that it is that much heavier than many other touring cars, that PP is actually quite high if you look at it that way. Now, in a straight line, this car is okay. The acceleration is strong, but the top speed not so much. There are quite a few other touring cars which can beat this in a straight line purely for top speed, but for acceleration, which is what matters more of the time, it's more than good enough. It's got big lazy torque. The engine never really feels like it's working that hard, which is kind of an American trait, and to some degree a Mercedes-AMG trait, and I like it when vehicles are like that. You feel as though you've always got more than enough power and torque to get the job done. Sometimes they even feel more powerful and more torquey than they actually are, and that can be very useful. Now, as far as its all-round ability, this car is, as far as classes, as we said, very, very niched, but in its use, it can be useful. You put this car up against touring cars, you're going to have a good chance. Yes, it is heavier than many of them, but it's still a competitive car. The handling on this car, I would say, is very good. Definitely good enough to go up against many of the other touring cars in various classes, and although the top end speed isn't that great, on most tracks that doesn't really matter, because with full downforce not many of the touring cars are going to be getting past 190, 200 even, that often. So it doesn't really matter as much in the case of a touring car. In something like a prototype, of course, you need that top-end speed. In these cars, you just don't as much. It's nice to have it, but it's not essential. Now, as far as price, this car is pretty expensive. It's 1.15 million credits, so it does cost a lot more than many of the touring cars in this series, but it's still not the most expensive. That's cheaper, for instance, than the Mercedes 190e DTM machine, and this car can easily destroy that car around the track. There's no competition between the two. So the value for money, especially in comparison to that car as an example, is definitely there. The bang for buck is better than at least the Mercedes 190e, and it happens to also be better than many others. This car can easily outrun almost all of the PD original touring cars, with the exception of pretty much the Nissan GTRs. Apart from those, stuff like the RX-7, the Integras, certainly the Civic of course, the Lexus touring cars, and various others don't really stand a chance against this machine. So although it is definitely niched, this is not a car to be taken lightly. It's a vehicle which is definitely worth your time and consideration. Not many people at all use this car, so if you like being different from the crowd, as I do, and I know many of you guys do, this is definitely worth a shot. It's competitive enough to win. It's completely unique, one of the most unique race cars in the game in fact, and it can definitely give you victories if you use it properly. But that's it overall for this particular pick. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.